What would you do if you discovered your entire marriage was a lie while giving birth alone? Claire Bennett found out her husband wasn't at an investor meeting. He was proposing to his secret wife. Yes, his other wife, while Claire nearly died delivering their triplets. But this wasn't just betrayal. It was his fourth time running this exact scam on four different women across 8 years. One of his victims didn't survive. Claire decided she would. And what happened next involves the FBI, hidden recordings, and a courtroom showdown that exposed everything. If you want to see how she took him down, smash that subscribe button and buckle up. This one's intense. The security camera footage told two stories at exactly the same time. On the left screen, timestamp 8:15 p.m. Claire Bennett screamed as her body convulsed on a delivery table at Mercy General Hospital. On the right screen, same timestamp. Her husband, Brett Holloway, slid a $200,000 diamond ring onto another woman's finger at the Apex rooftop bar. Both moments were supposed to be sacred. Only one of them was real. I'm Claire Bennett, and this is the moment my life ended and began. But let me take you back 24 hours to when I still believed in fairy tales. The baby shower streamers hung perfectly across our suburban living room, pastel blues and yellows that matched the three cribs waiting upstairs. 30 women I'd carefully curated over the years. The wives of Brett's business partners, the mothers from the neighborhood playgroup I'd already joined, even though I didn't have kids yet. I was building the life Brett said we needed, the perfect life. Another mimosa? Claire, my sister Jenna asked, her journalist eyes scanning the room with practiced skepticism. We'd been estranged for 3 years, ever since Brett suggested I needed to focus on us instead of family drama. She'd driven 6 hours from Portland for this shower, and I could feel the weight of everything unsaid between us. Just orange juice, I said, patting my enormous belly. Triplets, Emma, Lucas, and Owen, according to the ultrasounds tucked in their baby books upstairs. 3 miracles the doctor said had a 1 in 10,000 chance of happening naturally. Brett's phone buzzed on the coffee table. Again, he'd been glued to it all morning, barely participating in the games, the gift opening, the celebration of our growing family. When he finally picked it up, his face tightened with that expression I'd learned meant business emergency. "Babe, I'm so sorry," he said, already standing, already leaving. "Investor meeting. The Silicon Valley guys are only in town tonight. This is the final funding round we need." The women made sympathetic noises. Such a dedicated husband, building an empire for his family. I smiled the smile I'd perfected, the understanding wife smile, even as something cold settled in my chest. "It's fine," I said. "Go change the world." He kissed the top of my head, not my lips. He smelled like expensive cologne and ambition. "I'll have my phone on. The second you need me, I'm there." After he left, Jenna cornered me in the kitchen while I was arranging leftover finger sandwiches. "Claire, boy, yo, I saw his car last week outside an address downtown." A woman answered the door. "You're following my husband," I snapped, louder than I intended. "I was investigating a story in that neighborhood. I saw his car by chance. He's expanding the business, meeting with potential office space, consultants, investors. You never liked him, Jenna. Don't turn your conspiracy theories on my marriage." She held up her hands in surrender, but her eyes said what her mouth didn't. I'd chosen him over the truth 3 years ago, and I was about to do it again. That night, at 9 p.m., my water broke while I was arranging stuffed animals in the nursery. The pastel elephant slipped from my hands as warm liquids soaked through my dress. For a moment, I stood frozen, staring at the 3 perfect cribs, 3 mobiles spinning slowly in the air conditioning current. Then the first contraction hit, and I grabbed my phone. Call Brett, straight to voicemail. Text Brett, water broke, heading to hospital. Please come. The message showed as read at 9:03. No response. I called again, and again, 6 times as I drove myself to Mercy General. One hand on the wheel, the other clutching my belly as contractions made the world blur. The hospital intake nurse looked alarmed that I'd driven myself. "Your husband?" she asked gently. "Important business meeting." I heard myself say, "He'll be here soon." But he wasn't. At Mercy General, Sarah Reeves checked the fetal monitors with a deepening frown. I'd been laboring for 3 hours now, and Brett's phone continued going to voicemail. The nurses had stopped asking about him. which somehow felt worse than their concern. Claire, your blood pressure is climbing, Dr. Reeves said, her voice carefully calm. 160 over 110. That's dangerously high. And baby C, Owen, his heart rate is showing signs of distress. Just keep calling Brett. I gasped between contractions. He has to be here. He promised. What I didn't know, what the security cameras would later reveal, was that Brett had received every single call, every text. The hospital had called his phone 16 times from their main line. He'd blocked the number after the fifth call, at the apex, 3 miles away. Brett Holloway sat across from Vanessa Sterling in a private corner booth with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering city. She was everything I wasn't: sharp angles where I was soft curves, ice blonde hair where mine was mousy brown, a tailored power suit where I'd been wearing maternity yoga pants for 6 months. Is it done? Vanessa asked, swirling her champagne. Her left hand was conspicuously bare, waiting. The baby should be born by now, Brett said, checking his phone casually. 17 missed calls from Mercy General. He silenced it permanently. Once paternity is established, the divorce proceeds exactly as planned. She gets nothing. I keep the company, the house, and establish my parental rights for tax purposes. And she has no idea that I'm not your girlfriend, Vanessa said. A statement, not a question. Claire, ACA, Brett laughed. She stopped asking questions about the business 3 years ago when I convinced her that her job was to support me, not interrogate me. She signed every document I put in front of her without reading them, including the ones that transferred her company shares to your holding company. Vanessa leaned forward. And she doesn't know we're already married. Las Vegas, 5 years ago, completely legal, which makes my marriage to Claire completely void. She's not my wife. She never was. She's been my placeholder. Brett pulled a velvet box from his jacket. Inside, a 7-carat diamond caught the restaurant's ambient lighting and fractured it into 1,000 sharp points, ready to make it official in front of people who matter. At the hospital, my body was breaking. The contractions were coming so close together that I couldn't catch my breath between them. Dr. Reeves made a decision. We need to do an emergency cesarean section. Now, your blood pressure is critical, and we're losing fetal heart tones on all 3 babies. No, I sobbed. Brett has to be here. He has to meet them. He promised. Claire, Dr. Reeves gripped my hand. I need you to focus on me, not your husband. Me. These babies need you to be strong right now. Can you do that? Through the fog of pain and betrayal and something I didn't yet have a name for. I nodded. They wheeled me to the operating room, bright lights overhead turning the world into an overexposed photograph. As the anesthesiologist administered the epidural, as nurses draped blue sheets across my chest, I felt my phone buzz one more time in the pocket of my hospital gown. One text, from Brett's number, but it wasn't from Brett. This is Vanessa. Stop calling. He's with me now. He'll contact you through his lawyer on Monday. The world tilted. The machine started beeping urgently. Dr. Reeves was shouting orders I couldn't quite hear through the ringing in my ears. Claire, stay with me, she commanded. Your blood pressure just spiked to stroke levels. We need you calm. But I wasn't calm. I was drowning as they lifted the first baby from my body. Emma. I heard her cry, but it sounded underwater. Then Lucas. Then Owen. 3 cries. 3 lives I'd created with a man who wasn't where he'd promised to be. We have a problem, someone said. She's hemorrhaging. The last thing I remember before the world went dark was Dr. Reeves's face above mine. Claire, I need you to fight. Your babies need you to fight. At the apex, Brett Holloway was on one knee. Vanessa Sterling, you are the most brilliant, ruthless, perfect woman I've ever met. Will you marry me? The entire restaurant turned to watch as Vanessa extended her left hand and allowed Brett to slide the ring onto her finger. She didn't say yes. She didn't need to. They were already married, already partners in a scheme I was only beginning to understand. They toasted with $300 champagne. While 3 miles away, Dr. Reeves made an incision to save my life, removing the uterus that was killing me, ensuring I would never have another child. Brett and Vanessa kissed, and the restaurant applauded. I bled out on a surgical table, alone. The security cameras captured all of it. I opened my eyes to white ceiling tiles and the steady beep of machines. My father's face swam into focus above me, his weathered firefighter's hands gripping mine with desperate gentleness. Nick Bennett had driven through the night from his retirement home in Arizona, still wearing his Mercy General security guard uniform from the part-time job he'd taken to stay active. Dad, my voice was a croak. Thank God he breathed. You've been out for 14 hours. Memory crashed back. The delivery, the pain, the text from Vanessa. The babies, 3 fighters, just like their mama. Emma, Lucas, and Owen are in the NICU. They're small, about 4 pounds each, but they're breathing on their own. Dr. Reeves says they're miracles. Relief made me dizzy. Then the second wave of memory, Brett's absence, Brett's betrayal, Brett's silence. Where is he? I asked. Dad's jaw tightened. He showed up an hour ago. Flowers and apologies. He's in the NICU now, playing devastated father for the nurses. His phone died, I said automatically, the excuse I'd been preparing to believe. He was in a meeting. He got here as soon as he could. Claire, Dad's voice was gentle but firm. I've been working security here for 2 years. I've seen a lot of husbands miss deliveries. None of them show up clean-shaven, showered, and smelling like cologne the next morning without a single sign of frantic worry. He doesn't look like a man who just spent the night desperately trying to reach his dying wife. Before I could respond, Brett entered the ICU room. He looked perfect, designer suit slightly rumpled in what could pass for distress, expensive watch catching the fluorescent lights, hair artfully disheveled. He carried a bouquet of roses that probably cost more than my hospital room. Claire, baby, thank God you're awake. He rushed to my bedside, but I noticed he positioned himself opposite my father, maintaining distance. I'm so sorry, my phone died during the investor meeting, and by the time I realized what was happening, you were already in surgery. I've been here all night. It was a good lie. I wanted to believe it so badly that I almost did. Almost. The babies, Brett asked, and I heard something hollow in his voice, like an actor remembering his lines. They're perfect, I said, searching his face for the man I'd married. 3 perfect miracles. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I can't wait to meet them, but you need to rest now, recover. I'll handle everything else. I want to see them, I said. Our babies, I need to see them. Brett glanced at his watch, a gesture so quick I almost missed it. The nurses said maybe tomorrow. They're still stabilizing them. That's not true, Dad interjected. Dr. Reeves said Claire could visit the NICU as soon as she woke up. That was her first request. Tension crackled between the 2 men. Brett's smile went sharp. Nick, I appreciate you being here, but I think Claire and I need some private time to process what just happened to our family. Of course, Dad said, but his eyes promised me we'd talk later. He squeezed my hand 3 times. Our old signal from childhood. I love you. Stay strong. I'm here. After he left, Brett pulled a chair close to my bed. Up close. I could see the truth beneath the performance. No shadows under his eyes from a sleepless night. No worry lines. Just calculation. Claire, we need to talk about some business things while you're recovering, he began. The investor meeting went well, but there are some documents that need signatures, power of attorney, some financial transfers to protect our assets during your medical leave. Every instinct I'd been taught to ignore suddenly screamed, medical leave from what? I haven't worked in 3 years. Exactly, Brett said smoothly, which is why we need to restructure some things. The company is at a critical juncture, and with you unable to help. A nurse entered, saving me from responding. She was older, kind-faced, with 30 years' experience written in the efficient way she checked my vitals. Mrs. Holloway, your blood pressure is still elevated. You need rest, not stress. She gave Brett a pointed look. Of course, Brett said, standing. I'll be back this evening. Rest now, Claire. I'm handling everything. After he left, the nurse made a small notation in my chart. That's strange, she murmured. What? The hospital called your husband's phone 16 times during your delivery. The records show they all went to voicemail. Then after the fifth call, it shows the number was blocked. She looked up, compassion and anger warring in her expression. Honey, phone batteries don't block hospital numbers. The world tilted again. 3 hours later, when Dad returned with my sister Jenna, I was sitting up in bed, staring at my phone. Brett had texted 17 times, each message carefully calibrated, loving concern mixed with subtle reminders that I needed to sign urgent business documents for our family's financial security. Jenna took one look at my face and knew. Tell me, she said. So I did. The NICU was a cathedral of beeping machines and hushed prayers, 3 isolates in a row, each containing a tiny miracle. Emma, Lucas, Owen, 4 pounds each, their skin nearly translucent, their lungs fighting for every breath. I sat between them in a wheelchair, one hand on each isolate, unable to reach the third, tears streaming down my face, and they were beautiful. They were mine, and something was very, very wrong. Jenna stood behind me, her phone already out, her journalist instincts activated. Claire, but I need you to authorize me to investigate officially. Because what you just told me, that's not just infidelity. That's a pattern. A pattern. The text from Vanessa, the blocked calls, the urgent financial documents. I've seen this story before. I've written this story before. Different names, same playbook. Jenna crouched beside my wheelchair. I need you to trust me like you used to. Before Brett, I looked at my babies, fighting for life in their plastic boxes. Do whatever you need to do. Dad, still in his security uniform, had spent his break pulling footage. He returned with a tablet and a grim expression. You need to see this. The security camera footage from the hospital parking lot, timestamp 8:47 p.m. the night of the delivery. Brett's BMW pulled into a spot. He sat in the driver's seat for 6 minutes, phone to his ear, laughing, actually laughing. Then he pocketed the phone, checked his reflection in the rearview mirror, and walked casually into the hospital. He was here, I whispered. He was in the parking lot while I was dying. For 30 minutes, Dad confirmed. He sat in his car for 30 minutes before coming inside. The betrayal was a physical thing, clawing up my throat. But beneath it, something harder was forming, something that felt like steel. I need Marcus Webb, I said. Marcus had been my college roommate's boyfriend, now a struggling forensic accountant with a tiny practice in a strip mall. I need him to look at our finances. Why, Jenna asked. Because Brett's been pushing financial documents at me for 3 years, and I signed every single one without reading them. He said I didn't need to worry about business details, that my job was creating our home. I looked at my sister. I think he's been stealing from me. Marcus arrived that evening, laptop bag over his shoulder, concern written across his face. He'd gained weight since college, lost some hair, looked exhausted from building his own business against bigger firms. But his eyes were sharp. Claire, I need every password, every account number, every document, he said, pulling up a chair in my hospital room. And I need you to prepare yourself. If your instinct is right, what I find might be bad. It was worse than bad. It was surgical. 3 hours later, Marcus looked up from his laptop, his face pale. Claire, your joint checking account has $847 in it. That's impossible. We had $40,000 last month. Transferred out in increments over the last 2 weeks to an account registered to VLS Holdings. Marcus turned the screen toward me. Do you know what VLS stands for? I shook my head. Vanessa Lynn Sterling. The room spun. Jenna grabbed my hand. Dad stood, fists clenched, the firefighter in him ready to fight. Marcus continued, his voice clinical, detached, because that was the only way to deliver this kind of devastation. Your house is in foreclosure. Brett stopped paying the mortgage 6 months ago. You have $17,000 in credit card debt you didn't know about. And Claire, the company Holloway Tech Solutions, you don't own any of it. Would I help build that company? I worked marketing for 2 years before the babies. You did, and you owned 40% equity as co-founder. But 3 years ago, you signed documents transferring all your shares to VLS Holdings. I have the paperwork, your signature, notarized. I remembered then, 3 years ago, when Brett suggested I quit working to prepare for starting a family. He'd said the share transfer was a tax strategy, a liability protection, a way to shield our personal assets. I'd signed it because I trusted him. How much is the company worth? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Current valuation, approximately $12 million. You just gave away $4.8 million. The silence in the room was absolute. Then Jenna spoke, her voice deadly calm. That's financial abuse. That's fraud. That's calculated, premeditated theft. That's what I think too, Marcus agreed. But Claire, there's more. The business structure shows VLS Holdings isn't just a shell company. It's registered to Vanessa Sterling. Yes, but it lists a co-owner, Brett Holloway. They've been business partners for 5 years. 5 years. Our entire marriage was 4 years old. They knew each other before we met, I said slowly. I think, Marcus said carefully, they planned this before you met. The next morning, while I was attempting to pump breast milk for my 3 fragile babies in the NICU, Brett walked into my hospital room with a manila folder and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Claire, we need to talk. Behind him, a woman entered. Vanessa Sterling. Though I didn't know her name yet, she was everything the text message had promised: beautiful, cold, and completely at home in my husband's presence. This is Vanessa, Brett said casually, as if introducing a colleague instead of the woman who'd texted me from his phone while I was dying. She's here as a witness. A witness to what? Brett set the folder on my hospital bed tray. I'm filing for divorce. The words should have hurt more than they did, but I'd been dying by degrees for days now. And somewhere along the way, I'd gone numb. You're serving me divorce papers while I'm in the hospital. 2 days after giving birth to your children. Our children are premature and will require extensive medical care. You're physically and emotionally unstable. I think it's best if I take primary custody while you recover from postpartum depression. I don't have postpartum depression. The medical report says otherwise. He pulled a document from the folder. Official letterhead from a psychiatrist I'd never met. Dr. Raymond Foster. Diagnosis: severe postpartum psychosis. Recommending temporary separation from infants for safety. I've never seen this doctor. He consulted with your medical team. It's all properly documented. Brett's voice was patient, condescending, the voice he'd used increasingly over the past 3 years whenever I questioned anything. Claire, I'm trying to help you. Sign the custody agreement, and we can all move forward peacefully. Vanessa spoke for the first time. Brett's offering very generous terms: monthly child support, visitation rights once you're stable. He just wants what's best for the children. Something in her voice, the smooth confidence of someone who'd said these lines before, triggered a memory. That article Jenna had written 2 years ago about corporate fraud and marriage scams. The woman in the story had described a similar scenario: divorce papers, custody threats, manufactured mental health crises. I'm not signing anything, I said. Brett's patient expression cracked. Claire, don't make this harder than it needs to be. You have no job, no income, no home. Because you stole all of it. He blinked, genuinely surprised that I'd figured it out. That's a very serious accusation to make without evidence. I have evidence. I did now, thanks to Marcus. I have financial records. I have security footage. I have witness testimony from hospital staff. And I have a very good lawyer. I didn't actually have a lawyer yet, but the bluff landed. Brett and Vanessa exchanged a glance, a flicker of communication that confirmed everything. We'll see what the judge says, Brett said coldly, dropping the folder on my bed. You have 72 hours to respond to the custody petition. After that, temporary custody goes to me by default. They left. I sat holding the divorce papers with shaking hands, my breast pump forgotten, milk running down my hospital gown. The door opened again, and I looked up, expecting another blow. Instead, it was Dr. Reeves. I heard, she said quietly, closing the door behind her. The nurse station heard the whole thing. He filed a psychiatric report claiming I have postpartum psychosis. From Dr. Raymond Foster. Dr. Reeves's expression hardened. Claire, Dr. Foster lost his medical license 3 years ago for falsifying disability claims. Whatever document Brett showed you is fraudulent. Would you testify to that? In court against a wealthy CEO? Dr. Reeves was silent for a long moment. Then she nodded. Yes, I've delivered over 5,000 babies. I've seen every kind of parent, and I've seen women lose children because men like your husband know how to manipulate the system. She pulled up a chair. You were fighting for your life on my operating table while your husband was somewhere else. Whatever happened to your marriage isn't your fault, and I won't let him steal your children using lies. That afternoon, I called every lawyer I could afford, which was exactly none of them. Family law attorneys in our city charge $5,000 retainers. I had $847 to my name. The 17th lawyer I called, a woman named Patricia Brennan, who practiced out of a small office near the university, listened to my story and was silent for so long I thought she'd hung up. Mrs. Holloway, she finally said, I'm going to take your case pro bono. Why? Because I was wife number two. Patricia Brennan met me in my hospital room the next morning with a wheeled briefcase in the calm intensity of someone who'd already won this war once before. She was mid-40s, expensively dressed despite her pro bono offer, with sharp eyes that had clearly seen through men like Brett before. 5 years ago, she began without preamble, I was married to a man named David Sterling, tech entrepreneur, charming, ambitious. We'd been married 3 years when I got pregnant. He convinced me to quit my legal practice to prepare for motherhood. 2 months before my due date, he served me with divorce papers and a custody petition claiming I was mentally unstable. The story was eerily familiar. He'd been transferring marital assets to shell companies for years. By the time I realized what was happening, I'd lost my house, my savings, and nearly lost my son. It took me 2 years and every favor I'd ever earned in the legal community to expose the fraud and get full custody. What happened to him? Prison, wire fraud, identity theft, and falsifying court documents. Turns out I wasn't his first victim. There were 3 others in different states. Patricia Brennan pulled out a thick file. David Sterling had a sister, Vanessa Sterling. My blood went cold. Vanessa was convicted of conspiracy in her brother's schemes but served only 18 months due to a plea deal. She's been operating under the radar since then, changing tactics, getting smarter. When I heard the name in your case, I made some calls. Oh, Patricia spread photographs across my hospital bed. 3 different women, different cities, different years, all with the same haunted expression. These are Brett Holloway's previous wives, I asked. Wife, singular. You. Patricia pointed to a marriage certificate. Brett Holloway married Vanessa Sterling in Las Vegas 7 years ago. They never divorced, which means your marriage to him is void. You were never legally his wife. Claire, you were his mark. The room tilted. Everything I built my life on was sand. But we have a marriage certificate, a ceremony, 4 years of common law partnership with a bigamist, which actually works in your favor legally, because it means all marital assets accumulated during your partnership belong to you as common law property, not subject to divorce proceedings. Patricia's smile was sharp. Brett thinks he's filing for divorce to take your children and your assets. What he's actually done is opened himself up to criminal prosecution. Jenna burst into the room, laptop open, face flushed with the electric energy of a journalist who'd just cracked a story. Claire, I found them. The other victims. She'd spent 2 days digging through public records, marriage licenses, property transfers, and bankruptcy filings. The pattern was precise, repeated across 5 years in 3 different states. California, 2012, Brett met Amanda Parsons, an inheritance heiress, married her after 6 months. She gave birth prematurely to twins. He filed for divorce 2 weeks later, claiming she was mentally incompetent. She lost custody, lost her inheritance, lost everything. She died by suicide 3 years ago. My hand flew to my mouth. Oh God. Texas, 2016, Rebecca Walsh, owner of a successful marketing firm. Same playbook, quick marriage, pregnancy, premature birth, divorce filing, custody battle. She fought harder, actually made it to trial, but Brett's lawyers buried her in motions until she ran out of money. She disappeared after the trial. I'm still trying to locate her. And now me, I whispered. Now you. Jenna confirmed. But Claire, there's a difference this time. We know the pattern, we have evidence, and we have allies. Marcus entered, adding his own research to the growing pile. The shell companies trace back through 5 different states. VLS Holdings is just the latest incarnation. Before that, it was Sterling Ventures. Before that, V&B Holding Bongs. Brett and Vanessa have been running this scam for at least 8 years. How much money? I asked. Combined from all victims, approximately $18 million. The number was incomprehensible. This wasn't just betrayal, it was enterprise-level theft. Patricia began organizing the evidence with the efficiency of someone preparing for war. Claire, I'm bringing in the FBI. This crosses state lines, involves wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. But I need your permission. Once we involve federal authorities, there's no going back. Brett will know we're coming for him. I looked at my sister, my father, the lawyer who'd survived what I was surviving, and the accountant who'd exposed the truth. Then I thought about Emma, Lucas, and Owen in their isolettes down the hall, fighting for every breath while their father planned to steal them. Call the FBI, I said, but Brett moved first. The next morning, 2 Child Protective Services workers arrived at my hospital room with a court order. Mrs. Holloway, we've received a credible report of child endangerment. We need to conduct an immediate evaluation of your fitness as a parent. Based on what report? The social worker, a tired-looking woman in her 50s, read from her tablet. Anonymous tip received yesterday reporting that you've been demonstrating erratic behavior, refusing medical treatment, and making threats against the children's father. Every word was a lie. Dr. Reeves appeared in the doorway, furious. This is completely false. Claire has been a model patient, completely appropriate, and deeply bonded with her infants. We still need to conduct the evaluation, the social worker said apologetically. It's protocol. The evaluation took 3 hours. Questions about my mental health, my support system, my plans for caring for premature triplets. Every answer documented, every emotion analyzed. When they finally left, I was shaking. They're building a case, Patricia said grimly. The CPS report, the fake psychiatric evaluation, the divorce filing. Brett's trying to establish a pattern of instability before we can expose his fraud. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the NICU, hands on my baby's isolettes, watching their tiny chests rise and fall. A nurse approached gently. Mrs. Holloway, there's someone here to see you. She says it's urgent. The woman waiting in the family consultation room was thin, haunted, but determined. She looked like she'd been beautiful once, before something broke her. My name is Rebecca Walsh, she said. I'm Brett Holloway's second victim, and I'm here to help you destroy him. Rebecca Walsh looked like a ghost of who she'd once been. Jenna's research had shown photographs from her successful marketing firm, days confident, vibrant, powerful. The woman sitting across from me in the hospital's family consultation room bore only a passing resemblance. But her eyes were clear, and her voice was steady. I've been following your case, she said. Your sister's inquiries triggered alerts I set up years ago. Any mention of Brett Holloway, Vanessa Sterling, or their shell companies. I've been waiting for another victim to surface who was strong enough to fight back. What happened to you? I asked. Rebecca's hands trembled slightly as she pulled out a worn folder. Everything your sister found in her research. Brett swept into my life like a hurricane, all charm and ambition. We married fast, got pregnant faster. When my daughter Lily was born 2 months premature, he was already moving assets offshore. I thought I was fighting a divorce. I didn't realize I was fighting organized crime. Did you lose custody? For 2 years, he used the same playbook, fake psychiatric reports, anonymous CPS complaints, a legal team that buried me in motions until I couldn't afford to fight anymore. By the time I realized what was happening, my business was bankrupt, my reputation destroyed, and Lily was living with Brett and Vanessa. How did you get her back? I didn't give up. I worked 3 jobs, saved every penny, and hired a forensic investigator who specialized in financial fraud. It took 18 months, but we found the pattern, evidence of 2 previous victims before me. We brought it to the FBI, and they opened an investigation. But then, Rebecca's voice cracked. Vanessa's brother David got arrested for similar schemes. Part of his plea deal was giving up information on Vanessa. The FBI's investigation into Brett went cold because they were focusing on the bigger fish. So he got away with it, I said. He got smarter. He and Vanessa separated publicly, made it look like she'd moved on, changed their corporate structures, got better at hiding the paper trail. I got Lily back through the family courts once the criminal pressure was on, but I had no money left to pursue civil damages. I've been rebuilding my life for 3 years, waiting for him to strike again. Patricia leaned forward. Rebecca, would you be willing to testify to provide your documentation to federal investigators? I've been ready for 3 years, but Claire needs to know what she's signing up for. Brett and Vanessa don't just fight dirty. They fight to annihilate. When I started winning in court, they released my sealed medical records to my clients. They created fake social media accounts claiming I was abusing my daughter. They filed false police reports. They tried to get me committed. The word should have terrified me. Instead, I felt something crystallize. These people had hurt others. They'd counted on victims being too broken, too poor, too exhausted to fight back. But they'd made a mistake with me. They'd given me allies. I'm not backing down, I said. Rebecca smiled for the first time, and I saw a glimpse of the powerful woman she'd been. Good, because I brought you something. She pulled a flash drive from her pocket. Every document from my case, every financial record, every fake report, every piece of evidence I gathered, and contact information for Amanda Parsons' sister. She saved Amanda's files, too. Marcus took the flash drive with reverent care. This is enough to establish a criminal pattern. Claire, combined with your case, we have RICO potential. RICO, I asked. Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. Patricia explained, it's what they use to prosecute organized crime. If we can prove Brett and Vanessa engaged in a pattern of fraud across state lines with organized structure, the penalties are severe. We're talking decades in federal prison. Jenna was already typing. I can corroborate this through my journalism. If I publish the pattern, it puts public pressure on federal prosecutors to act. But Claire, once this goes public, there's no hiding. Every detail of your life will be scrutinized. I thought about Emma, Lucas, and Owen, about the future they deserved, free from the shadow of a father who saw children as leverage and marriage as theft. Publish it, I said, but we underestimated how fast Brett would move. The next morning, I woke to my phone exploding with notifications. A local news site had published an article, Local CEO's Wife Suffers Mental Breakdown, Loses Custody of Newborn Triplets. The story was fiction wrapped in carefully worded truth. It mentioned my hospitalization, the premature birth, and quoted unnamed hospital sources expressing concern about my stability. It referenced the CPS investigation and Brett's reluctant custody petition. It painted me as a tragic figure losing grip on reality while Brett played the anguished husband forced to protect his children. It's character assassination, Jenna snarled, reading the article on her laptop. They published this to poison the jury pool and intimidate you. It's working, I admitted. My phone was filled with messages from old friends and colleagues. Their concern thinly masking judgment. Even the nurses in the NICU were looking at me differently. Then it got worse. At 2 p.m., the same CPS workers returned, but this time with police escort. Mrs. Holloway, we have a court order for emergency removal of the minors Emma, Lucas, and Owen Holloway pending psychiatric evaluation of the mother. The world stopped. What? No, they're in the NICU. They're premature. They need medical care. They'll be placed in medical foster care with trained providers. This is temporary until your evaluation is complete. I tried to stand, but my post-surgical body wasn't ready. Dad caught me, holding me up as I screamed. Dr. Reeves came running, demanding to see the court order, arguing medical necessity, but the law was clear. I watched through the ICU window as they prepared my babies for transport. Emma, Lucas, Owen, each carefully placed in portable incubators, their tiny bodies swallowed by medical equipment. A nurse was crying. Dr. Reeves was on the phone, shouting at someone about medical ethics, and I collapsed, something inside me breaking in a way the surgery hadn't touched. Patricia was already on her phone, demanding an emergency hearing. Jenna was documenting everything, camera rolling. Marcus was pulling court records, proving the judge who'd signed the order was a golf partner of Brett's lead attorney. But none of it mattered in that moment. My babies were gone. Rebecca sat beside me on the NICU floor, holding my hand. I know, she whispered. I know exactly how this feels. And I'm going to tell you what I wish someone had told me. This isn't the end. This is the moment you decide who you're going to be. The broken victim they expect. Or the mother who burns their whole world down to protect her children. I looked at her through my tears. How we stopped playing their game, she said, and we created our own. The plan was born from desperation and fury. Patricia called it controlled detonation. I called it war. Brett thinks he's won, Patricia explained, spreading documents across the table in her small office where I'd been discharged to after 3 more days of medical observation. He has temporary custody, public sympathy, and a narrative that paints you as unstable. He's confident enough to be careless now. So we use that confidence against him, Rebecca added. She'd become a fixture in our war room. Her experience with Brett's tactics invaluable. The plan required me to do the hardest thing I'd ever done, pretend to break. I called Brett from Patricia's office, my voice carefully calibrated between exhaustion and defeat. Brett, I can't do this anymore. The legal battle, the media attention, the fighting, you're right. I'm not stable enough to take care of them. Silence on the other end. Then, cautiously, Claire, I'm glad you're being reasonable. The children need stability. I'll sign whatever you want, the custody agreement, the financial settlement. I just want to see them once before I sign. That can be arranged. I could hear the triumph in his voice. My lawyer will draw up the papers. We can meet this week. Can we do it somewhere neutral, not the hospital, not your office, somewhere we both feel comfortable? How about the apex where I proposed to you? The cruelty of the suggestion nearly broke my performance. The place where he'd put a ring on Vanessa while I was dying. That's fine. After I hung up, Rebecca squeezed my shoulder. You did perfectly. He believed it completely because it's what he expected, what he's seen before. Marcus had spent 3 days building the technical infrastructure. The table you'll sit at is wired with 3 backup recording systems, audio and video, streaming directly to FBI servers and Jenna's cloud backup. If any one system fails, we have redundancy. Jenna was coordinating with FBI Special Agent Carmen Torres, who'd been investigating Vanessa's family for years. Agent Torres is very interested in Brett, Jenna reported. When I showed her the pattern across multiple states, she fast-tracked the investigation. They're ready to move once we have him on tape. But Claire has to get him to confess, Patricia warned. The recording needs to establish the conspiracy, the fraud, and the intent to harm. It needs to be undeniable. Dad, who'd been quiet through most of the planning, finally spoke. What if he gets suspicious? What if he doesn't say anything incriminating? Then we're no worse off than we are now, I said. But if I can get him to gloat, to explain exactly how he destroyed me, we have everything we need. Rebecca pulled me aside before I left for the meeting. Claire, I need to prepare you for something. When you're sitting across from him, wearing a wire, knowing your babies are in foster care because of his lies, you're going to want to scream. You're going to want to attack him, to make him hurt the way you're hurting. I know, but that's not how you win. You win by becoming someone he doesn't recognize. Someone cold enough, calculating enough, to let him hang himself with his own words. She looked at me with the hardness of someone who'd survived this. Can you do that? I thought about Emma, Lucas, and Owen in a stranger's home, about the life I'd lost, about Amanda Parsons who'd died thinking she'd failed, about Rebecca who'd spent years rebuilding, about every woman who'd come before me and every woman who might come after. Yes, I said, I can do that. The apex looked different in daylight, less glamorous, more exposed. Brett was already seated at a corner table, the same table where he'd proposed to Vanessa. He'd dressed carefully expensive, but not ostentatious, the look of a successful man making painful compromises for his family. Vanessa sat beside him. Of course she did. I approached the table, my footsteps measured, my expression defeated. I dressed in clothes that hung loose on my post-surgical body, emphasizing how much the ordeal had taken from me. No makeup, hair pulled back, the picture of a woman who'd given up. Claire, please, Brett said, standing with false courtesy. Thank you for coming. This is the right decision for everyone. I sat without acknowledging Vanessa. Patricia had coached me on every micro-expression, every word. I just want this to be over. It will be, Brett assured me. He slid a folder across the table. I've tried to be fair. Monthly child support, supervised visitation once you're cleared by psychiatric evaluation. You keep your personal items from the house. I looked at the papers without touching them. And what do you keep? The company, the house, primary custody. It's all in there. He leaned back. Relax now. Claire, I know this seems harsh, but you have to understand. You're not equipped to raise 3 children. You never were. Because I trusted you, I said quietly. Because you were weak. Vanessa spoke for the first time, her voice cold. Brett needed a partner who could build something, not someone who needed to be taken care of. I let the insult land, absorbing it, using it. You're right, I was weak. I signed everything you put in front of me without reading it. I gave up my career. I isolated myself from my family. I made it easy. Brett's smile widened. You did. And Claire, that's not entirely your fault. Some people are suited for ambition, and others are suited for support roles. You're a support person. There's no shame in that. Is that what Amanda was? I asked, looking directly at him. A support person. His smile faltered, just slightly. I don't know who that is. Amanda Parsons, California, 2012, twins born premature. You took everything from her. She's dead now. Brett's face went carefully blank. Vanessa's hand moved toward his arm, a warning gesture, but he shook her off. I think your grief is making you confused. I've never been to California. What about Rebecca Walsh, Texas? You remember her? Now I had his attention. His eyes narrowed, calculating. Claire, if you're trying to manufacture some conspiracy theory to avoid taking responsibility for your mental health issues, it won't work. Sign the papers. Or my next call is to CPS reporting you as combative and paranoid. I'm not paranoid. I leaned forward, my voice dropping. I'm just wondering how you did it. How you convinced 3 different women in 3 different states to trust you, marry you, give you access to their assets, and then walked away with everything while they lost their children. That takes skill. Brett, planning, partnership. I looked at Vanessa. Did you help him from the beginning, or did you join the business later? Brett stood abruptly. This meeting is over. You're clearly not ready for rational discussion. Sit down, Brett. My voice was suddenly hard. Nothing like the defeated woman who'd walked in. Because here's what I know. You and Vanessa have been married for 7 years, which means I was never your wife, which means our children aren't subject to divorce proceedings, which means every asset you accumulated during our partnership belongs to me as common law property. His face went white. I also know about VLS Holdings, Sterling Ventures, and the other shell companies. I know about the $18 million you've stolen from 4 women across 8 years. I know about the falsified psychiatric reports from Dr. Raymond Foster, who lost his license 3 years ago. I know about your golf buddy judge who signed the emergency custody order. I know everything. Vanessa moved to leave, but I wasn't finished. The FBI knows too. They've been investigating Vanessa's family for years, and you just gave them a new target. So here's my offer. You transfer full custody of Emma, Lucas, and Owen to me within 24 hours. You transfer all company assets back to my name. You pay Rebecca Walsh and Amanda Parsons' estate restitution. And maybe, the FBI decides you're a small enough fish to throw back. Brett's laugh was ugly. You have no proof of any of this. It's the word of a mentally ill woman against a respected CEO. Actually, I said, reaching into my coat. I have this. I pulled out a small recording device and placed it on the table between us. The red light blinked steadily. And this conversation has been streaming to FBI servers and 3 cloud backups for the last 15 minutes. Everything you said about me being weak, about Amanda and Rebecca, about your partnership with Vanessa, all recorded, all admissible. While Brett lunged across the table, but he was too late. Agent Torres and 4 other FBI agents emerged from strategic positions around the restaurant. Badges displayed. Brett Holloway, Vanessa Sterling, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, identity theft, and RICO violations. Agent Torres pulled Brett's arms behind his back with professional efficiency. You have the right to remain silent. The restaurant had gone silent. Patrons stared as the perfectly dressed couple was cuffed and led away. Brett's face was purple with rage, screaming threats that the agents ignored. Vanessa said nothing, her cold mask finally cracking into something like fear. I sat at the table, shaking, as Patricia appeared beside me. You did it. You got everything we needed and more. My babies, I said. Can I get my babies now? Emergency custody reversal hearing is in 2 hours. Judge Torres is a federal judge, no connection to Brett's network. With this evidence and the federal charges, you'll have them back today. I stood on trembling legs and walked out of the apex, leaving Brett's unsigned custody agreement on the table. Behind me, Jenna was already uploading the footage to her news site, the story that would break Brett's empire. Rebecca met me outside, tears streaming down her face. You did what I couldn't. You stopped him. We stopped him, I corrected. All of us. Dad wrapped me in a hug that smelled like coffee and safety. Let's go get your babies, sweetheart. The federal courthouse was everything the apex wasn't cold, institutional, impersonal, but it was also fair. Judge Helena Torres presided over the emergency custody hearing with the brisk efficiency of someone who'd seen every manipulation tactic and wasn't impressed by any of them. Brett's expensive lawyers made their arguments the recording was inadmissible, obtained under duress, entrapment. Judge Torres listened with an expression that suggested she'd heard better lies from amateur criminals. Counselor, she said, cutting off Brett's lead attorney mid-sentence, your client confessed to conspiracy to commit fraud while knowingly committing bigamy. The recording is admissible because Mrs. Bennett was a party to the conversation and in a one-party consent state. The federal charges supersede any family court proceedings. Emergency custody is reversed immediately. Patricia stood, her voice steady. Your Honor, we're also filing for immediate dissolution of Mr. Holloway's parental rights based on his admission of planning to use the children as leverage in a fraudulent scheme. Judge Torres reviewed the transcripts. Her jaw tightened. Granted, pending criminal trial outcomes. Brett Holloway's parental rights are suspended. Mrs. Bennett has full legal and physical custody. Brett erupted from his seat. You can't do this. Those are my children. This is a conspiracy. She trapped me. The bailiff moved toward him, and Brett's lawyer physically restrained him. Judge Torres's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Mr. Holloway, you admitted on tape to deliberately targeting vulnerable women, stealing their assets, and using their children as weapons. Your children are not leverage. They're human beings, and they deserve a parent who sees them that way. Sit down before I hold you in contempt. In the gallery, I sat between Dad and Jenna, my hands clasped so tightly my knuckles were white. When the judge's gavel fell with finality, something inside me unclenched for the first time in weeks. You can pick up your children from foster care within the hour, Patricia said, squeezing my shoulder. They've been cleared medically and are ready to come home. Home, I didn't have a home. The house was in foreclosure, my savings stolen, my life demolished. Actually, Juan, Marcus said, appearing beside us with his laptop. About that, while the FBI was arresting Brett, I filed emergency financial motions. All assets are frozen pending federal seizure. The house foreclosure is halted. And Claire, the company is entirely yours now. Brett's shares transferred to you by court order. I don't want his company, I said. You don't have to keep it, Marcus replied. But right now, it's valued at $12 million. That's $12 million to rebuild your life, pay your legal fees, compensate the other victims, and secure your children's future. Rebecca appeared in the courthouse hallway, her daughter Lily on her hip. The little girl was 4 now, healthy and happy, everything her mother had fought for. Claire, there's something you should know. The FBI is offering plea deals to Brett and Vanessa if they cooperate about the other victims and offshore accounts. Will they take it? Vanessa will. She always does. Brett. Rebecca shook her head. He still thinks he's smarter than everyone. He'll go to trial, and he'll lose. She was right, Etienne. The trial took 6 months, and I followed every moment while rebuilding my life piece by piece. The evidence was overwhelming testimony from 3 victims, financial records spanning 8 years, the recording from the apex played in court for a rap jury. Brett's defense was that he was a businessman making difficult decisions, not a criminal. The jury disagreed. Wire fraud, conspiracy, identity theft, RICO violations, 42 counts, guilty on all of them. Sentencing day. I sat in the gallery holding Jenna's hand. Emma, Lucas, and Owen were home with Dad, healthy now, thriving, blissfully unaware their father was being sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. Brett's eyes found mine across the courtroom. For a moment, I saw something like regret, or maybe just anger that he'd been caught. Then he looked away, and I realized I didn't care anymore, which it was. Vanessa got 12 years for cooperation. She'd helped the FBI recover $9 million in offshore accounts, exposing 3 more victims in 2 additional states. The web of destruction Brett and Vanessa had woven took years to fully untangle, but every thread led to the same conclusion. They'd built a criminal enterprise on the broken lives of women who trusted them. After sentencing, Patricia and I stood on the courthouse steps while Jenna conducted interviews for the article that would win her a journalism award. "Claire, what's next for you?" Jenna asked, her phone recording. I looked at the city stretching out below us, the same city where I'd nearly died, nearly lost everything, nearly let them win. "I'm renaming the company," I said. "Bennett Solutions. We're pivoting from predatory tech sales to ethical marketing for small businesses. And I'm establishing a foundation for victims of financial abuse, starting with full restitution to Amanda Parsons' family and Rebecca Walsh." "Rebecca told me you offered her a position as COO. Jenna said, "She earned it. She survived what killed Amanda. She helped me survive. She deserves to help other women do the same." That evening, I drove to the NICU where Emma, Lucas, and Owen had spent their first weeks of life. Dr. Reeves met me in the parking lot, the same parking lot where security footage had caught Brett laughing. "I wanted to thank you," I said, "for testifying, for believing me, for saving my life that night." Dr. Reeves shook her head. "You saved your own life, Claire. I just helped you bring your children into the world. Everything after that, that was all you." We stood together in the fading light, 2 women who'd witnessed what happened when systems failed and when they worked. "How are the triplets?" she asked. "Perfect," I said. "Healthy, growing, loved. They'll never remember any of this. That's my gift to them." "What will you tell them when they're old enough to ask about their father?" I'd thought about that question a lot during the long nights of feeding, changing, rocking 3 babies who demanded everything and gave back infinite love. I'll tell them the truth, that their father made terrible choices, but those choices don't define them. That they come from a long line of fighters, their grandmother, who I never met but who must have been strong, their aunt who never gave up on me, their grandfather who showed up when it mattered. That families aren't just blood, they're the people who stay. Dr. Reeves smiled. "They're lucky to have you." "I'm lucky to have them," I corrected. 18 months after the sentencing, I stood in the backyard of a modest house in a quiet neighborhood, watching Emma chase butterflies while Lucas and Owen built elaborate block towers that defied physics and gravity. The house wasn't the showpiece Brett and I had owned. It was smaller, older, ours. Dad had moved into the converted garage apartment, claiming retirement was boring and his grandchildren needed a full-time protector. He'd installed elaborate security systems and taught the babies to laugh at his terrible jokes. Jenna visited every weekend, bringing her new girlfriend and enough coffee to fuel our sister strategy sessions about the foundation. Bennett Solutions occupied a renovated warehouse in the revitalized downtown district. We'd hired 15 employees, all women rebuilding their lives after financial abuse. Rebecca ran operations with the fierce efficiency of someone who knew exactly what was at stake. Marcus kept our books clean and testified regularly as an expert witness in financial fraud cases. The foundation had helped 23 women in its first year: legal support, financial counseling, job placement, housing assistance. We named it the Parsons Walsh Bennett Foundation, honoring all 3 victims who'd fought back. Brett's appeals were denied. Vanessa would be eligible for parole in 8 years. I didn't think about them much anymore. What I thought about was the garden, literally and metaphorically. I'd planted tomatoes, basil, wildflowers, watching them grow with the same attention I gave everything now. Nothing taken for granted. Every green shoot a miracle of persistence. "Mama," Look, Emma held up a butterfly that had landed on her finger. She was careful not to crush it, gentle in the way children are when they instinctively understand fragility. It's beautiful, baby, I said, crouching beside her. Just like you. My phone buzzed. A text from Patricia. Another referral. Woman in Oregon. Similar pattern. Can we help? I looked at my children, playing in the safety I'd fought to create. At my father, dozing in a lawn chair with a book on his chest. At the garden growing despite everything that had tried to kill it. Yes, I texted back. We can help. Because that was the thing Brett never understood. You can tear someone's life apart, steal their assets, manipulate the system, use their love and trust as weapons. You can do all of that and think you've won, but you can't kill the part of a person that decides to survive. You can't steal resilience. You can't manipulate the fierce, protective love of a mother who's seen the worst and chosen to become better. Brett had tried to erase me. Instead, he'd revealed who I actually was. Someone who fights, someone who builds, someone who turns pain into purpose and trauma into transformation. Lucas brought me a dandelion, the kind people call weeds. For you, Mama. I took it, this small, bright thing growing where it wasn't wanted, thriving anyway. Thank you, sweetheart. It's perfect. That evening after the babies were asleep, I sat on the back porch with Dad and Jenna. The summer air was thick with the smell of jasmine and possibility. I've been thinking about giving a TED Talk, I said, about financial abuse, the patterns, how to recognize them. You should, Jenna said immediately. Your story could save lives, and I don't want to be defined by what happened to me. You're not, Dad said, his voice gentle. You're defined by what you did about it. There's a difference, and he was right. The woman who'd signed away her assets, isolated herself from family, made herself small to fit Brett's vision of a perfect supportive wife. That woman was gone, not erased, not forgotten, but transformed into someone stronger. I thought about Amanda, who hadn't survived, about Rebecca, who'd survived but carried scars, about the 23 women the foundation had helped and the countless others still trapped in similar webs. I'll do the talk, I decided, but not about Brett, about us, the survivors, the fighters, the ones who rebuilt. Later, alone in my bedroom, I opened my laptop and began writing. Not the TED Talk yet, but something else. A letter to my children, to be read when they were older. Dear Emma, Lucas, and Owen, I typed. You were born into chaos, but you are not defined by it. Your father made terrible choices, but you are not his choices. You are mine. You are your grandfather's. You are your aunt's. You are the product of everyone who chose to fight for you when fighting seemed impossible. This is what I want you to know. People will try to tell you that you come from a broken home. Don't believe them. You come from a home that was broken and rebuilt stronger. You come from a mother who learned that survival isn't passive. It's the most active choice you can make. You come from a family that proves blood isn't what makes you related. Showing up is, your father wanted to erase me, to make me small and forgettable. A footnote in his story of success. Instead, he gave me the greatest gift. He showed me who I actually was. Not the woman he tried to create, but the woman I chose to become. I hope you never have to fight the way I did. But if you do, remember, you come from fighters. You come from survivors. You come from people who looked at impossible odds and said, watch me. I love you bigger than the universe and fiercer than any battle. Your Mama. I saved the file and closed my laptop. Through the baby monitor, I heard Emma murmur in her sleep, a sound of contentment and safety. Tomorrow, I would go to the office and help another woman navigate the legal system designed to fail her. I would continue building a company that valued ethics over profit. I would plant more seeds in my garden and watch them grow. But tonight, I sat in the quiet house I'd fought to create, surrounded by evidence that destruction isn't the end of the story. It's just the beginning of the next chapter. And I was the one writing it.